Hey everyone, it's April 28th. That's a Tuesday. I know I said I was going to have this up on a Monday. Things came up. Mostly it was just me playing video games and writing poetry. I've been playing XCOM Chimera Squad. It's pretty fun. There's a lot of new features in there. A lot of things not in there from the other XComs. Fun fact: I also really like XCOM. So I've played a ton of XCOM, like hours and hours and hours, and I've totally like modded the second one to be a Star Wars mod, which is probably the most fun I've had in a game in a long time. But yeah, I've been doing that. That's a fun game. Also, like I said, I've been writing poetry because another fun fact about me, I enjoy writing poetry. I have an Instagram, not entirely dedicated to it, but there's a lot of it on there. I do write quite a bit, and one of my acquaintances asked me. Actually, he didn't ask me. He was did a tweet out to to collab with some writers, and I'm always looking to step outside my zone, step outside of my comfort zone, and figure out what all I'm capable of and things like that. So I decided to collab with one of my acquaintances, and it's been good. It's inspired me to write outside of outside of my comfort zone into a genre that I'm not used to, the horror genre, and it was fun. I don't know if I did a great job or anything, but he liked it, so I guess it's an A+ for me, or at least a score for me. And another fun fact: one of my favorite writers is Edgar Allan Poe, and despite me really enjoying his work, I don't get down with his kind of writing as far as my own. I don't write that way. But so I tried. I think I did all right. Like I said, the person liked it. I'm gonna try to write some more that way. See if I can do something with it. But yeah, onto the podcast though. This is gonna be the last episode for a bit. Like I said, I broke it up into seasons. Did 2 episodes a week roughly, and this is gonna be the last one for a bit. But I think I'm going out with a bang. I have Tiza from Riot on here. He is the operations and championship lead for the Riot Scholastic Association of America. So pretty important guest. I sent out a tweet about a month ago asking if he would be on, and it took him a while to get back to me because he's working from home. Obviously, there's a whole season he has to deal with because a lot of things are being canceled because of the way the world is right now. So I wasn't even expecting him to get back to me. I figured I figured he was just being nice and saying, yeah, I'll get back to you. Obviously, he's lived up to his word, which obviously means a lot to me. But, I wasn't going to be a bit in our shape if he didn't get back to me because I didn't expect it. I was like, well, there's a ton going on right now. And I can only imagine the pressure he's under right at the moment. But he got back to me. So I'm incredibly honored. I felt great. I was like super surprised whenever he popped up saying, yeah, let's do it. If you're listening, Tiza, thank you very much. But yeah, we get into a lot of things. Obviously, it's all Collegiate League of Legends. That's where my passion is. That's obviously where his is. Or at least that's where his work is. I don't know if didn't even ask if that was his passion. Obviously, he's a DDR person. I know he really likes DDR and rhythm games, things like that. But I don't know. I'm not going to get too much into that one because I didn't actually talk about it. But we do talk a lot about Collegiate League of Legends. Him joining Riot, how he came into the position, his philosophy, things like that, the goals for the collegiate program. We get into a Q&A. He's the only person I've done a Q&A with because I thought he was I figured it would be good for the community, the Collegiate League of Legends community, to be able to ask him questions and just get some answers because I'm only one person and I know there's a lot of other people that want to ask somebody in charge about things. So we do a Q&A at the end. It was pretty cool. Fielded some questions again from various people in the collegiate League of Legends realm. So it was a good one. We sit down for a little over an hour and just again talk about Collegiate League of Legends. It was great. Started out talking about his marriage, by the way, because I'm married, and I tell a story in there about how whenever I was getting married, like people were kind of down on me because it was just like older people who have been through marriage. And whenever I got married, I told myself I'm never going to be like that, even if I get divorced, which I hope I don't. But everything's fine for now. But even if things go sour, I was never going to be that person that would bring someone down for their life decision. So anytime I hear that someone's married or I see someone's married, and if you're wondering why or how I know that Tiza's married, his profile picture is him and his wife. So at their wedding. So that's how I know. And anytime I see someone like that and I interact with them on a positive, with a positive rapport, I will always go out of my way to congratulate them on marriage and say, Mazel Tov, you're gonna love it, because that's what I wanted when I was getting married, and not many people were there for that. I feel like I'm really going on a tangent. I'm just gonna go and head it over to the podcast. It's a good one. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the outro. All right, how you been? You just recently got married, didn't you?
Yeah, in September.
Mazel tov. Marriage is
Thank you.
beautiful. Yeah, I'm glad.
So far, so good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I think I've been married for like 9 years at this point, and yeah, it's like, whenever I first got married, people were talking bad about it, and that was from divorced people, and and I don't know, like, just kind of bringing me down. But I know I've lived marriage, and there's like ups and downs and everything in life. But overall, like, it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. So I hope the same for you, man. It's beautiful. Marriage in general is beautiful. I'm happy for you.
I agree.
There's the spirit. All right, so let's see here. All right, yeah, you work at Riot.
That's
you're
true.
yeah, you're the so what is your official title at Riot?
So my official public-facing title is that I'm the Operations and Championships Lead for the RSAA, or the Riot Scholastic Association of America, and then my Riot title, which is actually in the process of changing because we're changing some stuff, but it is Associate Esports Manager College.
Okay, and how did you get into that position? Because were you hired on for that specifically, or were you already established at Riot, and you got transferred into that position?
I was hired by Riot in 2012 in May. My original title was just esports coordinator. I got hired right as Riot was starting to put their foot on the gas on kind of esports in general. That was early season two. The Freaks Basement World Championship had happened a few months prior, and they were like, "Hey, this esports thing is pretty awesome. Let's make this what makes us special." So I got brought on to kind of help with what became the league operations team. So basically, all the fun stuff about brackets, format, schedule. What's the best way to create a fair and exciting competition for League of Legends teams. So early, that was working with a lot of third parties like MLG, IPL, ESL, um, and eventually working up to our first self-produced shows, which was PAX in 2012, PAX Prime, and then the 2012 World Championship. Over time, I kept doing league operations for more things. So when we started the LCS, I was in charge of running online qualifiers for that for the first few seasons. I was the first head referee of the NALCS. Once Challenger Series spun up, they tapped me to lead the Challenger Series team for EU and NA. And then I sort of just kept working. As I joke, I keep working down the pyramid. I started at the World Championships, then did regionals, then did the LCS, then did Challenger. Now I'm doing Collegiate. To me, the thing that excites me the most about work is I think competition is awesome. I think it makes better people. I think it's a wonderful thing for people's lives. So I want to bring competition to as many people as possible, which is why I've continued to look for opportunities to sort of broaden the base of the pyramid and give more regular people a chance to compete and enjoy themselves.
And you say you're working down, so to speak, down the pyramid. Is Collegiate somewhere where you're looking to stop and just really, expand that region? Obviously, you already have. You've been doing it for quite a few years now. Is that something that you're still looking in the future? Or are you still thinking about other opportunities? Where else in the pyramid can you expand and put your influence onto?
I kind of take it one year at a time. One of the exciting parts and also challenging parts about esports and gaming in general is that it changes so much so quickly. If you were to ask me, this same question 3 years ago, I could probably wager a few guesses, and none of them would be collegiate.
That's
So
fair.
it's hard for me to say from here like where to go. I think I am enjoying my time on the collegiate team a lot. There's a lot to do. It's much more of a broad sort of space to work in, um, compared to the pro league, for example, where you set it up and then it's about fine tuning a very honed product, which is really cool, but something that I'm less excited about. Whereas in collegiate, there's so much room and so much opportunity to continue to build things out, to accommodate more players, to improve the process. We had 450 schools compete this year, and that's still like a quarter of all accredited institutions in the US and Canada. So there's still a lot of room to grow and expand, and the challenges there are really interesting. That said, there's a dream state where high school is twice as big as college because there's just so many more high schools and so many more high school students. There's a world where, Little League of Legends exists, where you're 13 and you join your city League of Legends team and you play for fun, and eventually that feeds up into bigger and bigger leagues, and you kind of create this competitive pipeline that pulls the best players from age 13 up through high school, through college, into the pros, or from high school directly into the pros or into academy. And those are problem spaces that we're thinking about a lot at Riot and starting to work on. And so that's definitely something that I'm kind of looking at with a lot of interest as someone who loves League of Legends, loves competition, wants to bring that to more people, but also honestly wants NA to win World someday.
Oh
So
yeah. Ideally,
we can dream.
we've been dreaming for what 10 years, almost 10 years now. We'll get
Coming
there.
up on it.
We'll get there. Yeah. So season 2, that's when Taipei Assassins won. That was the big stadium that they actually had, because you said you referenced Freak's Basement, which I've actually never heard it called that, but I mean it seems about appropriate considering how jam packed everyone was, and just kind of how low key and low budget it was. But then season 2 comes along, you're part of it, and it's exploded, and of course we're still seeing the expanse of that explosion still, in my opinion, because I mean now you go from there to sponsorships to just everything that comes with popularity and trying to create the infrastructure to support all of that. So you're seeing that now with the Pro League, but that's the beauty of Collegiate that obviously you understand, because well, yeah, you can fine tune the Pro League and all that, but like you said, Collegiate is expanding so much still, and there's still so much to do. So that's the kind of thing that drives you more, rather than seeing a finished product and saying, okay, this is good, but next year might be a little bit different. While we need to like tweak this. You'd rather see an entire. It sounds like you'd rather see like an entire landscape of things. Like, well, this can be built here, this can be built there, and instead of fine tuning something, you'd rather expand and create something. It sounds like, correct?
Yeah, I think something there are elements of that everywhere. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to reach a point where the LCS is done, if that makes sense, and we're like, cool, we
Right.
figured it out, and we're just going to do this forever. That's not a thing that anyone would ever say at Riot Games, let alone in sports or any. I think the interesting thing is I had a mentor describe this to me once. He said some people are like 0 to 20% people. They take an empty space and create something, and build a concept. And some people are 20 to 80% people where they take a kind of like not quite fully formed idea or like a nascent product and blow it up into something like really big and really special. And then there's like the 80% or 90% to 100% people, or to 99% people who are like the polishers and the fine tuners and the efficiency masters that find just like really great ways to squeeze like every last bit of value and smart improvements out of a product or out of a system. So I am a 20 to 80% person. I like seeing little seeds of something sitting there and saying, "Oh my God, this could be enormous. I want to take it there." So that was what appealed to me about Collegiate. I had already been helping the college team, and I'd been helping out Sherman kind of on loan every once in a while. He'd come to me and say, "Hey, we want to come up with this crazy season idea. Can you help us build a format?" And so I helped him out, and he'd always kind of mention, hey, if you ever want to join the college team, we'd have space for you. And I was like, yeah, I appreciate it. I'm happy where I am. And finally in 2015, he was like, hey, no, seriously, like, I think this is really special, and we want to put our foot on the gas and like really make this huge, and like here's this collegiate dream state. Do you want to help? And I was like, oh heck yeah. Like this sounds really,
Nice.
really cool. So I think like the thing that's most interesting to me about collegiate is that like we're still putting our foot on the gas. There's still all of this kind of blue sky dream world to be doing. Um, and so like I'm kind of still working on chasing that down, and that's the kind of things that excite me the most.
So you came 2015, so it's got 5 years now. Um, there's been changes. I mean, I don't think anything is really set in stone with Collegiate, because again it's new, it's expanding, you're finding new things to do. So you took it over from Jaws, is that correct?
Sherman had it in between me and Jaws, so it went from Jaws to Sherman to me and Sherman. Sherman still leads the college team, but I'm just doing the season operation.
Okay. So, with that said, you still have the responsibility of what your vision is and how to expand it and how to implement it into the collegiate system. Is that correct?
Yep.
So so you took it over from Josh. Sherman, you're helping Sherman out. Sherman has been there since Jaws. Jaws, he's the one that created it. I actually have him on the podcast. He'll be dropping Friday. So I got his ideas, his philosophies on what the collegiate system should be. Whenever you came in, you're going over things with Sherman. What kind of things did you want to implement from your your frame of mind, your take on all the aspects of Collegiate League of Legends that may differ from Jaws, that might be taking the collegiate League of Legends collegiate system in a different direction? What part of that was you?
Well, I'm pretty removed from Jaws's tenure, and also Jaws is great. He's a really good dude. I like him a lot. We used to play Ultimate Frisbee together when he was still at Riot. So
Nice.
I don't know about specifically what differs for me and Jaws, but I will say some of the things that I thought about adding kind of right off the bat was kind of like the Swiss regular season format that we've added to the regional conferences. The biggest thing there, kind of the opportunity I saw, was that we have a huge number of teams in this competition. At the time it was about 200 when I started, and when I first joined the team, the format was all the teams got seeded based on their MMR. I think got put into groups of like 5 or 6 teams, and they'd play a round robin within their group, and then the top 1 or 2 teams from their group advanced to the playoffs. And that works in the sense that it got the best teams kind of the best chance of advancing to the playoffs and so on. But because collegiate is so diverse in terms of skill, it's not like the pro league or even challenger or amateur or academy where there's sort of this floor of like you need to be at least this good to even make it through the door. College is anyone can show up and play. And we like that about college. We like that there are teams with 3 gold players and a plat player and 1 diamond player that want to enter the season and compete, and we want to make sure it's still a place for them. But the problem with the group system that we had was that a lot of those groups, especially towards the end, you'd have your very early varsity programs, your RMUs and your UCIs and your Maryvilles that are locked in a group with the teams with 3 gold players. And that didn't help anybody. You'd have 3 or 4 of these games that are just super, super lopsided. One that was kind of close for the top teams. And then that was it. You moved on to playoffs.
Right.
And for the lower ranked teams, it was the opposite. There were 3 or 4 just raffle stomps, 40-minute long best of threes, and one match that was kind of close that you probably still lost. And that was kind of a bummer. So something that was important to Sherman and I coming into the 2016 season where I first started doing stuff was to give teams more good matches. Give them more kind of opportunities to have close games, because the reality is, like, for 90 something percent of the schools competing, they're not in it for scholarships. They have no chance. They just want to play league competitively for their school with their schoolmates against other schools. So the goal there is to get to the best quality matches possible. And so the best way to do that, and especially for a very large 700 or several hundred pool set of competitors, is a Swiss format. So that was kind of the first thing that I kind of came out and said. I was like, hey, I think we should blow up the season format to get some good matches. And it's been a bumpy road at times, but it's definitely something that has sort of been I think the single biggest change that I think I came in and immediately dropped on the college League of Legends ecosystem.
I remember specifically praising that one because as a broadcaster, we do get these raffle stomps. Whereas, yeah, you said 40-minute best of threes. That's not entertaining whatsoever. And from my point of view, where I was at the time, I do like seeing everyone get a chance at the big guys, no matter what. But at the same time, when you have these groups that have so many different when there's like maybe like one god tier team up in there along with like 3 or 4 like not god tier teams, it gets kind of monotonous. Like how you know who's going to win. It's not very entertaining. And then that also in turn kind of keeps people away from watching the streams. And I'm actually a pretty big believer, if someone watches the product and if it's good enough, it should be, they'll probably come back and watch it again. And whenever you see like complete stomps like that, I don't consider that very entertaining product. So I actually was really happy when the Swiss format came out, because that meant that later on, it'll start out obviously with the with a high tier team taking on like a mid to lower tier team, but eventually it'll pan out to where the cream will rise to the top, and we get to focus on those. That made things so much more entertaining to watch and broadcast. And yeah, I was actually really happy with that kind of change. What other kind of obstacles did you run into, not only just implementing that, but any of the other sort of implementations that you've put in during the season? Because I know anytime that you post, Sherman, or any sort of official Twitter, post any sort of update on the system, there's always some sort of backlash, and it's not like widespread or anything like that. And I think that's important to take in, that while there are a lot of loud voices on Twitter, a lot of times they still are just very few select voices. What kind of obstacles do you run into whenever you post some of those updates? Do you take the feedback and reanalyze it, or do you just kind of sit back and it's like, this will take into effect and I think it's best for the best, or is it just kind of a based on the situation at the time?
I think it depends. I think there are some times where you have to face the reality, especially as a league administrator and as anyone that is trying to make a thing, that there is going to be a level of dissatisfaction with whatever you do. I kind of call it the cosmic background unhappiness. Because no matter what you do, let's say you're like, oh, hey, the season has these things that are struggling. We want to make it better. We're going to introduce this Swiss format. Regardless of what it's going to be, there's going to be 10% ish of people that are like, no, I don't like that. I like the other way better because of X, Y, and Z. And those can be totally valid reasons. They probably are totally valid reasons, because different things are important to different people. The question is, one, like whether that's something that you've thought about and considered already. And two, um, like how that factors into what you're actually trying to accomplish. Because the goal of the College League of Legends season is not to make everybody happy. We want to make people happy. That's definitely a big part of why we're doing what we're doing. But if the goal is to make everyone happy, we would always fail. So, for example, using some of this year's changes as an example, rest in peace to the season, but moving the college championship to the 32 team bracket, and moving the scholarships back to the championship. Some of the upside of that is that, as more partner conferences continue to pop up, as partner conferences get more competitive, it would feel bad for a team to move into a partner conference, which is what we think is healthier for the long run. If they're like, well, we were a top 8 team in the East Division, so we're basically guaranteed scholarships, and now we're not getting any. This sucks. I don't want to be in this partner conference. So that's pretty bad. Also, we want the college championship to be super important. We want it to be the pinnacle of competition, and we're not quite at a point where the college championship is just prestigious enough for the fact that it's the college championship. There's definitely a lot of it there. People are super happy to compete there, but there's still kind of an element of, you know, every so often someone in Twitch chat is like, what are they playing for? So there's like that thought out there that's like, what's the point? So as like more teams move out of regional conferences, as we want to make things bigger, kind of made sense to move scholarships into the championship. And what that meant was there were some kind of regional conference teams that were like, well, shoot, this makes it harder for us to get scholarships. This sucks. I don't like it. And we knew that was going to be a point of feedback. And the challenge there is that it's about good communication. If you lead with vision, and if you say, hey, here is this end state that we're trying to get to, here are the values that are important to us, here's why we're doing what we're doing. If you explain that well, even the people that aren't happy with the individual change will be able to understand what you're trying to do and why, and say, well, I don't like this, but it makes sense for what they're trying to do. Or the best case scenario is that you take the people that are unhappy with the individual change. If you make them happy with the vision or what you're trying to get to, if you're like, hey, here's this dream state where, all of your scholarship money isn't coming from Riot and winning, it's coming from your school because your school thinks this is cool enough to to give scholarships to all of its league players on its varsity team. That's a really cool end state. So if we can make it clear how these changes are a step towards that end state that we would all be happy with, that's like the best case scenario for to getting ahead of that kind of feedback. Um, and I think like something that has always struck me about the College League of Legends ecosystems that like college league players are smart, man. Like they understand the bigger systems that are in play, even when like even in the times that they're super unhappy about a change or about a decision, like the conversation is very rarely fixated on this thing is bad, I hate it. Screw you, Riot. Or
Right,
screw you,
right.
Tiza,
No,
or whatever.
yeah.
It's always much more systemic of, hey, if you're trying to do this, why aren't you doing X instead of Y? Um, so so we've had, I think, the most success talking about hard changes, leading with vision and with a plan, and talking about the bigger picture, and making people understand kind of what our long-term goals are. And when we do that well, we don't see as much of that, negative feedback or frustration with us, because we try really hard to build we're trying to build a system that will make players really, really happy in the long run, because they can play video games for their school, wearing their colors with pride, so that their hobbies and their pursuits, the things that they care about, are validated and valued by their school. And so they can get better opportunities to go to get a scholarship and go to a good school and work towards their future, whatever that may be, whether that's in league or not. And that's something really, really cool. So if we can take good steps to get there and kind of explain what we're doing along the way, then like it becomes this big journey that we're all a part of together, instead of, last year I would have gotten scholarships and this year I can't because, man, I don't like this.
Right. With that being said, you talked a lot about vision and things like that. Of course, that's everything you need. You need to have a vision to be able to get there. Has that vision changed since in the last 5 years, from the start of your tenure with the collegiate program to now? Has the vision changed or altered in any drastic way, or has it been pretty consistent?
It's actually been pretty consistent. I think the sort of the blue sky that kind of Sherman sold me on to get me to come to the team hasn't changed too much. Um, Kind of the one of the first things that we did uh, during the first off season that I was here, we sort of like established what our program values are and what are the most important things to the college program, and that was students first, long term sustainability, and competitive integrity. And we've kept that since I think fall 2016, 2017. I don't quite remember. I'm bad at dates.
You're fine.
Um, but um, but when before planning that first season where I was here and ready to kind of blow everything up and start changing things for the long run, we've kind of kept those pillars and we've kept that vision of like, hey, we want League of Legends to be a generational college sport, just like the LCS team mission is to make League of Legends a global sport that lasts for generations. Or that's the esports team, not the LCS team, but the LCS inherits that. Um, so like that vision of like, hey, we don't see a difference between esports and traditional sports. To us, they're all just sports. They're all compelling for the same reasons. They're good for you for the same reasons. They can fit in society in the same ways. That's always been there, and we've always been taking steps that we think will get us to that point quickly, and intelligently. So that has been consistent throughout. Some of the like tactics that we've been approaching have changed a little bit, um, but honestly, like my first year on the team was the first year we signed the Big Ten Network for a partner conference agreement, and kind of talking about why that was important and how that would kind of help us get to our mission, whether that was through, administrative adoption or taking kind of the best parts of the college sports ecosystem and synthesizing them with our own and kind of making something new and exciting. That's sort of been our plan since my day one, and we're getting kind of broader and more sophisticated, but the goal and the values have been the same.
And whenever you're saying you want League of Legends as a generational sport in colleges, what kind of assistance do you offer to colleges that might be struggling to convince their college campus or their the higher faculty to recognize, to take a look at this? um, and say, hey, this should belong at our school. Because there's still some notoriously large groups out there that don't have they might be recognized, but they're not quite there yet to where they can guarantee a next year for Collegiate League of Legends being established at that school, specifically like Boulder and even I think University of British Columbia. Although I think they're starting to look at it. I'll have to come back on that one. But is there any sort of assistance that you offer from Riot to have, since you guys have a little bit more resources and obviously influence within your own game? Do you offer any sort of assistance to those colleges that are struggling to convince their faculty that, hey, this is a real thing, pay attention?
Something that we've learned is that the more we try to help individual schools, the less effective we are. The reason for that is that every school is different. The goals of the institution, the makeup of the student body, all of the little factors that determine what's the best way to do this are always unique. Um, we are a lot of things at Riot. We have a very diverse group of people and experiences. We are not educators. We are not going to be able to walk into a university and say, hey, this is the best way to set up a League of Legends program at your school or an esports program at your school. Because the university administrators, the faculty members will always know their institution and their students better than we will. And that's just always going to be true. The thing that we can do to make it easier to start an esports program or start a League of Legends program or continue to support it or raise that support to the next level is kind of showing what our values are. Um, that is doing things like making the college championship a super polished professional broadcast. That's translating sort of gaming and esports into sports language so that an administrator that doesn't understand League of Legends or doesn't necessarily understand esports can tune into the college championship and see the motion graphics and hear the commentators and see the trophy lift and the championship hats and say, hey, I understand these things. I get this now. I see where this value is. Okay, let's explore this a little bit more. Let's go more into it. Um, that's a big part of our strategy behind partner conferences because the people that need to be convinced aren't faculty members. They're not kind of like the club sanctioning body on campus. They're the university presidents. Because we don't, like you mentioned, we don't want schools to be in a position where they're like, cool, you can do this club this year and we're going to reevaluate next year because that doesn't build that kind of long-term sustainability that is really needed for the best student experience or to just keep League of Legends around. The way to do that is to convince the kind of highest levels of authority of a university to do that, and students can't do that in a lot of cases, not because of a lack of ability or passion or information, but just that universities don't work that way. So when we get a conference, if an East Coast conference or a Peach Belt conference or any conference to say, hey, we think this is really cool. We're going to participate in this College League of Legends season. When that comes from a conference administrator and they go back to their presidents and say, hey, we think this is really cool and here's why, that carries way more weight and that scales way better because that's a conversation that's being had with 8 member institutions of a conference or 10 or 12 or 20 or however many. And that goes directly to the presidents because conferences are just collections of universities and university presidents. And they can have that conversation at that level and they can have that conversation in a language that is understandable to people that don't understand gaming. Um, we heard a really great description once. We go to a handful of college sports conferences every year, where I think it was an athletic director said that sports are the front porch of a university. It's what gets your attention. It's what invites you inside. But the point of a house isn't the porch; it's getting inside. But those sports, whether that's a football team or a lacrosse team or a fencing team or a gymnastics team, are a way to get people's attention and kind of invite them in and get them into the university proper. And so we kind of took that analogy and we're like, esports is our front porch of gaming in colleges and universities. It's our way of saying, hey, check this out. It's really cool. It feels a lot like college sports. It's really interesting. It's really inspiring. It's really engaging. And then they're like, oh, this is really interesting. Let's participate in this season. And we're like, cool. Now let's talk more about why gaming is important to your students and how it can add value to your campus, and go from there.
All right. So yeah. So yeah. I hope that I hope that, I do like the front porch analogy a lot. I do hope that there is more. I mean, I guess it's increasing every year that you're seeing more and more colleges embrace collegiate esports, which is also providing a lot of my colleagues jobs, which I'm so grateful for, and I love seeing people succeed. So that's also, I mean, that's beautiful. With that being said, I was wondering, so you did mention earlier, high school, going to college, creating a pipeline, and we're gonna have a Q&A later, and I believe this is gonna possibly tread into one of the Q&A questions because it has to do with the pipeline from collegiate to pro. And I feel like this has been asked of you constantly, but just to get it on record on the podcast, so I have it here. What is your philosophy with the pipeline from collegiate to pro, and or if there even is a pipeline there?
So realistically, pro teams are always looking for the best prospects they can find, and they're going to look anywhere there is competitive League of Legends. That can be collegiate, that will be amateur tournaments, your upsurges, that will be academy, that will be other leagues, that will be in solo queue. Anywhere where they have respect for the level of competition is where they're going to be looking for players. So the very best college players are going to get some attention from professional organizations. They're going to be looking to bolster their ranks. Um, that's different from college being an intentional, like, designed to be a pipeline to the pro scene. Um, like, realistically, I think there's some stat, there's there's however many tens of thousands of college basketball players, and a couple hundred get drafted every year, and that's the same for football. Like, the percentage is like 99.4% of college football players or college basketball players will never play a game in the pros, will never even sniff the pros. um, the point of the college season isn't to be a pipeline to pro, but it sort of will passively serve as one in the meantime. And we think as we continue to build the level of professionalism and competitiveness in the college season, which are things that are good for the college ecosystem overall, that's naturally going to make the level of play rise. It's going to make the teams more coordinated. It's going to make staff better. It's going to make players get better. And suddenly, over time, College League of Legends is going to be the third or fourth most competitive league in North America. Behind the LCS, behind Academy, maybe behind something else that doesn't exist yet. Um,
I want it higher than all of those.
I mean, and it could be there someday, but that's not what we're trying to do on purpose.
Yeah, I
So
got you.
it's kind of a nice side effect. It's a good way of saying, when a college player ends up on an LCS team, if you're shady, or if you're a player that goes to scouting grounds, if you're, like a Misty Stumpy that goes to scouting grounds after having a big season in collegiate, like, that's a sign to us that we're doing college well, and we're always going to support that and accommodate that. Um, but it's not something that we look towards as, like, how do we know, or like, what are we trying to make more of? The answer is not necessarily LCS players.
Fair enough. And there's more opportunity for collegiate players than ever now. So yeah, I mean, fair play to that. It's still working, and yeah, you see more college players in professional play. Actually, I haven't actually. I'm gonna be completely honest. I haven't watched too much LCS lately, but yeah, I mean, prior years, I even wrote an article how, despite there not being an intentional pipeline where, like, here, you're doing great in college, collegiate play, go play in pro now. That even though that physically doesn't exist, I have noticed that there's so much opportunity for collegiate players. JJ got FlyQuest. You have coaches in Sojin. He's now the head coach of CLG, which is phenomenal. He used to be Maryville. That's that sort of thing. I love that. I love seeing that sort of thing. So yeah, fair play to that. Because yeah, it is working, obviously, and there's more opportunity than ever. With that being said, going forward, let's move to modern day, not just vision or goals, because obviously there's the season got stopped because of the pandemic. How do you go forward from that, and then how do you handle this year, and how do you go next year? Or do you even consider this year a season going into next year? How do you handle this sort of situation? Obviously, I'm sure a lot of it's being discussed at the moment, but I would like to get your thoughts on it either way.
Well, our perspective right now is that the 2020 season is over. Um, it it will always exist as a season that happened, but a season that did not crown a champion or did not have a championship or so on. Um, and I'll be like totally candid. I think this was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make at Riot. Because it's just a lose. I
Right.
mean, all
Yeah.
around. Um, at the end of the day, the kind of call we made was that as the situation was getting more and more severe, and kind of the lack of information was the biggest obstacle to everything. We didn't and still don't have a sense of how long this is going to last, whether this is quarantines or an increasing number of cases or whatever the impact to our lives. We couldn't predict far enough in advance to say, the season needs X more weeks of competition. Can we plan that far in advance? And the answer was no. And then the second question was, is it fair to ask students to compete for scholarships when all of this is going on? Um, when some students might be sent home and not have as good of a computer or not have as great of an internet connection, or their ping is different, or in many cases students may not have the same kind of access at home. Maybe they don't have a good computer at all, or maybe they live somewhere where their internet provider is terrible. um, and the last thing we wanted is any situation where a student's having to decide between, they're being told to evacuate the campus or evacuate the dorms or so on, but they're like, yeah, but I might get a couple $1,000s in scholarships if I stay and win this match, so I might skip out on this quarantine order or this evacuation
Right.
order to play League of Legends. And that was an absolute non-starter for us. I mentioned our values early. Number one is students first. um, Being a student and frankly a human being is more important than playing League of Legends. We would rather someone quit League of Legends and take care of themselves. um, so we knew kind of at that point we couldn't in good conscience let the season continue. We had been in a holding pattern for a couple of weeks as we recognized that things were bad enough that we needed to stop now, and then we'd figure it out. Um, but as we sort of like put everything up, we realized that there was we had to kind of make that call to hit the big red button. Um, as far as next year goes, we're kind of taking it 1 month at a time. As far as we're concerned right now, the 2021 College League of Legends season is still going to happen. We have it, penciled in for the same timeline. We've been harping on over the last few years that we're not going to mess with the timeline. Registration is going to be in November. Matches are going to start in January. We're going to run until about April or May, and then have a college championship. We are still looking at that, knowing full well that in 3 months nothing may be better and we may need to move things, but that's okay. We have the flexibility to change things as needed. Um, and we know we have heard a lot of schools are discussing, what if we postpone the fall semester? What if we are all remote? What if this? What if that? We're gonna continue to rely on sort of our partners in the space, the RSAA board of advisors, schools that we have relationships with, and react quickly and flexibly if things need to change. But kind of the way we're thinking about it right now is we're like, hey, until we know we can't, we're gonna post the 2021 College League of Legends season as best we can, the same way we always do.
Fair enough. And yeah, I know everything's changing. Yeah, I remember whenever I was my job. I work at a casino, and I'm in the accounting department. So like we were one of the last to leave, and everything was changing. Almost every 12 hours, it seems I would get a text from my boss saying, "Hey, this is happening now." I was like, "All right, well, I guess that's just changing." But I mean, I can't imagine. I can't imagine having to plan a whole season that way. So I don't envy you in that. But yeah, fair shout, keeping the safety of the players first. That's definitely the most important. With that being said, I do want to move on to a Q&A, but there's one little thing. We don't have to get too far into it, but I am wondering, is there any plans for Riot, considering they're making, obviously they're expanding their library, their catalog of games now, Legends of Runeterra, Teamfight Tactics, Valorant. Are there any plans on expanding Collegiate into any of those games, or are you just planning on sticking to League of Legends right now?
Our perspective as Collegiate makes the most sense in support of a larger competitive ecosystem. So basically what that means is if we are supporting competitive college play at a higher level than we're supporting competitive professional play, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And will probably make our most dedicated players unhappy with us, which we don't want to do. So like realistically, we started College League of Legends because that was already important to players because students were already starting to create organizations to run higher level college competition. You know, your Ivy Laws and your CSLs back in the day. Um, so we're gonna sort of wait and see is kind of the best answer. Um, I I'm kind of too far away from the actual program teams or the game teams to have a strong sense of where they're going. But you know, we're going to respond to what our players care about. And so if one of our games, be it Valorant, TFT, Runeterra, becomes super competitive and well adopted, you know, Riot as a whole is going to move to answer that demand. And then once the professional scene starts becoming established, then we start looking down and say, okay, what else do we need to build to support the professional scene? And then, as I mentioned, we'll also look to see, you know, what are players on college campuses doing? You know, our sort of jurisdiction is our college player base. That might mean that there's bigger college competition someday. It might mean that there's, you know, competition that's smaller than the College League of Legends season that we're running. We don't know yet. We're keeping our options open. But something we don't want to do is we don't want to force anything to become an esport. We think being an esport is something that is earned, not created. That's kind of a Riot wide perspective. So that's why, you know, you haven't heard any announcements of what, you know, the Valorant esports strategy is because Valorant's in beta. We're still getting the game out the door.
Yeah.
We're gonna make the game. We're gonna make the game as best we can, and then we're gonna see how our players react and what our players need, and we're gonna build something for them then.
All right, fair enough. So we don't want to move on to a Q&A section. And before I do, like, this is just kind of this is off topic a lot, so just forgive me because this is my way my brain works. You know who Matt Jones is, the actor?
Yeah.
You know, anyone ever told you kind of have a cadence that sounds like him?
I've never heard that
There's
before.
like there are certain words that you were saying, and I can't really. I mean, it's just certain ways you say words, and this is not a complaint whatsoever. It's just because I've been playing Final Fantasy VII. He voices Wedge in the game, and I'm like, man, am I talking to? I thought I was talking to Wedge for a second because there's like I said, there's certain ways that you say things. It sounds just like him. That's way off topic, and I'm sorry about that, but it was just like in my
That's
head.
funny.
So we're gonna move on to Q&A, and some of these might have already been covered, but if you want to get into any more of the nuance of it, however you want, um, yeah, feel free.
Sure.
So some of the, I let people credit who they wanted to here, but other than that, I mean, some of these are going to be, a couple of these are going to be anonymous. So we'll start with one of the anonymous ones. All right. BTN was highly publicized and incentivized to join, but other large conferences haven't received the same treatment. And I assume he means join the, the collegiate circuit.
Yeah,
there.
the season.
Has Riot's approach to conference partners changed at all since BTN first joined? And if so, how?
Yeah, so the big thing with the B10 is that they were the first. That's kind of a truism in business is that being the first in anything is always the highest risk. We knew, and this is a little bit before my time, but we knew that a big part of becoming kind of entrenched in the college sports ecosystem is looking and feeling like a college sport in some situations. And I kind of touched on that earlier with like the college championship and the front porch analogy. Um, so for the Big Ten Network, when we started talking to them and started working with them, a big thing was, you know, I also mentioned kind of scholarships being pulled out of regional conferences. So back then, all the scholarships were in regional conferences, and there were a couple of schools, notably Maryland and Illinois, that were pretty competitive and were either getting those scholarships or knocking on the door of those scholarships. And Sherman had the foresight kind of off the bat to say, hey, something that will blow this up is if schools say, I'm losing, you know, students are saying, I'm losing scholarships to participate in this conference. That sucks and I hate this. Because it was the first, it was also kind of the first impression that everyone was going to get of this strategy. And so if the narrative became, you know, BTN yank scholarships away from players, that could blow the whole thing up. Um, so some of that is just, you know, BTN took the biggest risk by joining on before anyone had ever done that. So we wanted to make sure that we kind of covered all those bases. Once we kind of established that model, though, we knew that If it cost us $500,000 to sign a new partner conference, the college program would not exist very quickly.
Right.
We don't have that kind of budget. And for the BTN, that those scholarships were always on that kind of 2-year deal. We said up front with them that like, hey, we're going to do this for the first year, and we're going to reevaluate in our next extension. We kept it going, kind of with the condition that this is going to be the last one, because we knew that wasn't going to last forever and that wouldn't be sustainable. And as I've said a couple times, that like that long-term sustainability is what's really important to us. And frankly, like the Big Ten network is a big deal. The Big Ten is a Power 5 conference. It's very large. It's got a ton of fans and a lot of great schools there. So we knew getting them in the door would be huge for College League of Legends. So since then, like we didn't offer that to any other conference, and it doesn't matter if you're a Power 5 conference or a D3 conference or anything else. So in that sense, that's changed. As far as sort of like publication goes, we're still putting out. Conferences put out press releases when they sign with us, and we amplify those messages. Some of it is just that it's not new anymore. When BTN signed a deal to participate in the College League of Legends season, college media and college sports media and even traditional sports media were like, what the heck? Like, this is new. This has never happened before. This is really interesting. So there was a ton of buzz about that. I think a common misconception I get is that like media is something that is just bought. That we go knock on the door and say, hey, Sports Business Journal, can you publish this article for us, please? And they're like, sure, Riot. They'll come to us and say, hey, we heard you're doing this thing. Can we talk to you about it? So some of that is just kind of the natural like first mover bonus. And the Peach Belt Conference got a lot of similar press when they signed on because they were the second to do it, and they did it at a conference level instead of at a network level. But over time, when you're the 5th, 6th, 10th, 11th conference to do it, you put your press release out, and it's less of a like kind of national media event. It's less of a thing that hits the league subreddit. It's less of something that shows up in traditional media, and you get a message from your parents being like, "Is this that game you play?" I got that message. But well, not the game you play. But my dad was like, "Is this you?" Because he saw Big Ten Network signs with Riot Games to do College League of Legends.
What do your parents think of that sort of thing? I get so many opinions from parents and players, but I've never actually had an opinion on this rare opportunity of parents who's actually moving the mountains to make these things happen. What do your parents think of that sort of thing?
My dad loves telling the story to anyone that will listen about how wrong he was. That's a little over dramatic. My parents were always really supportive. They were the kind of parents that were like, "Hey, as long as you have a plan and you have a fallback, do whatever you want." So my parents were like, "Whatever you're doing, you're going to college. It doesn't matter if it's the community college down the street or Harvard. We don't care. You have to get a degree in something, and you have to get a job. And if you want to take some shots, if you want to do crazy stuff, whatever, that's up to you, but you need to be in a position to support yourself as an adult." So I had been a huge video game nerd my whole life. Video games have been my favorite thing since I was like 4.
DDR, right?
That was definitely part of it. That came much later, but there are pictures of me sitting in my dad's lap playing on a Mattel Intellivision in like 1988.
All right.
I'm like 1, so he gave me the controller that wasn't doing anything. So I'm like pushing buttons thinking I'm playing and I'm not doing anything. But my parents always saw video games as just like a hobby, something that was not necessarily taking away from school or other stuff, no more than hanging out with my friends was. But one of the things my dad was always said was, you can't just assume that you're going to be able to play video games your whole life. You need to have a preparation. So my dad's thing now is he's like, yeah, I'll see how much I know. But my parents were always both really supportive. When I first saw the job posting for Riot hiring an esports coordinator, I texted my parents and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the thing that I didn't think was real that is now real. And within 2 minutes, my phone was ringing. It was my dad, and he's like, "Get on LinkedIn and send me your resume." And da da da. He's like, "We're gonna make this happen." And so my parents were super supportive of me the whole time. And Now my dad every once in a while will share something on his Facebook to be like, "Hey, this is what JT's doing. Can you believe it?"
That's awesome.
Which is really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for answering that. Two questions there. Didn't mean to. I did not have that one prepared. So thank you for answering.
Yeah, I'm here to answer questions.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it very much. All right, next. So yeah, next question. This is from AJ Taylor of University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. What are your thoughts on scholarship schools that dominate so hard?
Well, that's kind of inevitable. Like if you follow college sports, there are some schools that are always good. Maybe not always the best, but always very good. And this is sort of a symptom of the early stages of esports growth. Right now, there are a few schools that are committing more than other schools because right now, no one's really sure what committing to esports means or how much they should commit. It's not always clear what the value is to every administrator. There are schools that are like, hey, this is cool. We think it's important. And also, we want to become known for this. But yeah, so some schools have committed very hard and gone full bore into their League of Legends programs or into their esports programs, and others have not. And that is what creates that sort of sense of, wow, there are a couple of these scholarship schools that have amazing rosters and are really good and scare everybody. Um, and that's going to probably slowly go away over time as more schools commit, that being the one that commits super hard to your League of Legends team will become more common. So those individual schools might start falling off, or at least get contested more. Um, but sort of the reality of kind of college competition or university competition at a high level is that not all schools want to spend the same amount of money on their teams as others. And that's a choice that every university has to make for themselves. That's kind of part of what I said about, there is no right formula for esports right now. Um, we want to build a competition that highlights the best schools and the best players and the best teams. That means the teams that have the best resources are going to rise to the top. We do want to sort of reward that behavior of committing resources to your team means that you're going to win the college championship, or you're going to be in the college championship, and you're going to get those eyeballs, and people are going to start associating your school with being really good at League of Legends. um, Participating in esports is sort of this it's hopefully a win-win-win for the students, the developers, and the schools. Schools want to attract good students. They want to uh, be somewhere where students can thrive overall as a human being, not just as someone that's trying to learn things and pop out the other side with a degree. Um, that makes their students more likely to stay longer and graduate with a degree and hopefully have a good enough experience that they continue to give back to the university as an alumni, whether that's with their time or with donations or anything like that. For players want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. That's what school spirit is all about. It's about becoming part of a community that has these values, that has this history, that stands for these things. Um, and obviously for developers, we just want our players to be happy and want our players to keep playing the game and kind of have a good time overall. So for some schools, that means being the best League of Legends team is something that's important to them. For others, they don't want to commit those resources to League because they have other things to commit to, because their values are different, or because they're not sure that they want to commit to that level yet. Um, that's okay. There's always going to be that gap. So for us, what we want to do is, we don't want to sort of lower the ceiling. We don't want to say, oh yeah, you should commit, but only this much, because that's gonna, take away from students that could have, this crazy, amazing experience. What we do want to recognize is that at a certain point, um, there will probably be a break point between um, schools that can or want to participate in the same pool as a growing number of varsity programs that might be committing a lot to their rosters. We don't want to close that prematurely. Every year there's a Western Ontario or some club program that's entirely student run that makes a deep run in the college championship and ends up taking top 4 in NA. So we don't want to get to a point where we say, oh, okay, the varsity teams are too good, this league is varsity only. um, but it might mean that at a certain point that competitive inter-school League of Legends play it takes different forms. It could mean that there's a a try hard league, your division one. Well, we can't say division one because we have division three schools and so on. But kind of your top level intercollegiate play and like a mid level intercollegiate play, or something else where we say, hey, look, you know, there's a growing number of schools that would compete but don't because they think, we're not cut out for this or we're not good enough. And then we'll have a new base of players that we're not supporting as well as we could, and we'll want to do something to support them. Right now we have, kind of casual club competitions, and things at the very bottom for kind of individual school play. Eventually there's going to need to be something that fills that middle gap. We're not there yet, but it's something that we're thinking about and working towards in the future.
Fair shout on that one. Next question. This is actually going to be two different topics, but three questions. We're going to ignore that though, because the first topic is just going to be, going to have two questions. So, yeah, I mean, you see how it's laid out. I have the Google Doc up for anyone who's not watching, so or doesn't have my access to my Google Doc, which is everyone except for Tiza. So I'm explaining it to you. This is going to be from Milo from University of Nevada, Las Vegas, right down the street from me. And I've never actually met him, but we've talked. But now I'm going to keep 6 feet away from him. What is your impression of all the governing bodies of esports? Does having all of these entities help the overall goal of establishing a pipeline? That's his first question.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of a natural progression of the growth of esports to feel this need for governing bodies. As we do a better and better job, kind of as an esports industry and as Riot with College League of Legends, making college esports feel like college sports, people are going to go, cool. So this is college esports. So who's the esports NCAA or the NAIA or whoever? Um, and that's really because like the sport model breaks down when you look too closely at it as far as it's applied to video games. Nobody owns football. Nobody owns basketball. Anyone can just say, "Hey, we're going to run a basketball tournament," and they can do that. The publishers kind of add this interesting sort of ecosystem complexity to the case because somebody owns League of Legends. If you were to say, hey, we're going to make this business running League of Legends tournaments and we're going to make a ton of money off of that, you're not legally allowed to do that because we own League of Legends. Not without our permission, obviously. So depending on what the developer wants to do. So in our case, we say outright we are the governing body of College League of Legends. We kind of established the RSAA to fill that role more explicitly. Not all developers want to do that. And that's also fine. It depends on what your objectives are in the college space. So there's a demand for like who's in charge of all of this, who's organizing all of this, and there's a lot of value that they could add. Um, the I won't speak in too much detail because it's outside of my area of expertise, but in general, like there is value to establishing best practices and helping schools that don't know anything about esports get involved in the space and start to learn things very quickly. Um, we're also at a point right now where many models of how to make money in college esports don't really exist or don't really make sense yet. We're not participating in the Scholastic space to make a profit, at least not in the short term. Our profit model is we get people to play League of Legends and we get people to keep playing League of Legends, and eventually they'll buy a skin.
Worked on me.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, it worked on me before I started working at Riot.
Right.
But so the challenge with a external governing body is that the money has to come from somewhere. A lot of times that comes from membership dues from institutions, which is pretty normal practice. Um, but a lot of that stuff is still kind of nascent and unproven, nascent, excuse me. Um, so it's hard to say right now, but there are a lot of people that are getting involved in the space that are clearly very passionate, and want what's best for students and want to help build this out. And I think if you find an organization with the right people that are focusing on the right things, taking care of student experience, making fair competition, helping schools that may not have the resources to bridge a gap themselves, bridge those gaps, there's a lot of potential value in these sort of membership institutions. But there are also some that, not the biggest ones, but there are some that are like unclear what their goals are or what their long-term vision is. So I would say that it's not mandatory to join a governing body or a membership institution to participate in esports, and that's something that a lot of schools don't realize. Um, but but yeah, it's early days right now, so it's kind of hard to say overall. But a good piece of advice I have for any sort of business venture is like look to align values, look to find people like that are good and trying to aspire to something better. And if you can find those people, then you can feel comfortable working with them and doing business with them. And if you're not sure what someone's all about, you should be wary.
Fair enough. So second pronged on that one. Not having anything to do with the previous ones. Same from Milo, UNLV. How would you best explain to a parent that esports is a legitimate thing now?
I mean that depends a lot on the parent, but I think the things that I would point to is you point to LCS finals at Madison Square Garden or at the Staples Center. You point to the number of scholarships that are being given out to esports, varsity esports players or League of Legends players, Overwatch players. A lot of different games. You can point to the World Championship and the filling up the bird's nest in China or Songnam World Cup Stadium in Seoul. Any of these like incredible, huge, storied institutions that are participating in esports. Um, it's it's something that is it's one of those moving goalpost kind of things because a parent is concerned about different things, but usually legitimacy comes down to how do I know that my child is doing something that will help them in the future or help them progress. And the things to point to there are like, hey, this isn't just about playing a video game all the time for fun. It's people are learning how to manage teams. People have to coach. People have to make the game. If you want to work at a video game company, it's not just do you make video games. Someone needs to be marketing for video games. Someone needs to be information technology. Somebody needs to be a graphic designer to work in the video game industry. Um, it's not just about playing the games. And I think is making it clear that like there are careers here and there are sort of a lot of companies that care a lot about long-term growth and ecosystem change. That's something that will make parents feel a little bit better about it.
All right. And yeah, I mentioned earlier that I'm like one of the biggest reasons why I'm glad that Collegiate League of Legends is growing and just collegiate esports in general is because there's so many more opportunities for all my colleagues and my friends and people I know. I've made acquaintances through this business, and I like to see them all succeed. And yeah, that's definitely part of it. Having there's more than just that that front face of people. Like there's everyone behind the scenes working. So yeah, very much so. There's a lot of opportunity in there now. The next question is going to be from Travesty. He's a broadcaster colleague of mine. The first question is, what do you think of Collegiate League of Legends being a legitimate pathway to pro play? You've already answered that one beforehand, saying that it already established the way that it established already works because you get more recognition from that. But I do want to point out his next question: are there any Collegiate League of Legends broadcasts you tune into during the season?
I watch a little bit of college play during the season, not a whole lot, mostly because there's so much now that it I struggle to keep up with everything. I will usually spin through um, our sort of stream TV guide of the college stream submission form output, where we post what to watch every weekend. I'll usually click on a handful of those streams just to pop in, see how it's going, and get an overall sort of temperature check on the broadcast. Um, Other than that, I will start watching usually around week 5 or 6 of the regular season when you get to those, the super hype week 5, week 6 Swiss matches where it's like, oh man, you've got, Maryville and Illinois playing or something like that. One of those like kind of big playoff heavyweight matchups. And then I'll usually pop in for like matchups that I recognize as being like pretty close in the playoffs. I'm actually terrible at watching streams. I get distracted way too easily. I'll start watching League for 20 minutes and be like, oh man, I want to play League so bad right now. So I'll usually end up watching for like 10, 15 minutes and then running off to play on my own.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that's a problem a lot of us have. At least I know I do. That's why it's hard for me to keep up with professional League of Legends. It's not like I don't absolutely don't like it. It's just I have to sit there and watch it. It's like I can't do this. My grandfather used to do that with NASCAR. I was like, I don't know how you do this. I was like that as a 7-year-old. Now I'm like that as a 32-year-old. just with my own sport. So yeah, I get that one. All right, last question is going to be from an anonymous person here. What do you think of COVID-19's effect on the competitive collegiate scene? And I know we've talked about that a little bit already, but if you have anything else you want to add or expand on that, just as far as the collegiate scene in general, here it is. Go for it.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say right now. Something that we are seeing is like we're noticing, I think all across the country that the internet's kind of wonky right now because everybody's on the internet.
Yeah.
And you've seen Twitch numbers are through the roof and Steam numbers are through the roof. And like a lot of people are at home right now, quarantined, trying to stay safe. And so they're turning to video games and digital entertainment to bridge that gap. And they're watching Netflix and TV and listening to music and things like that. So the short term thing we were focused on with the college season is like how do we deal with the chaos given that the stakes or given what the stakes are right now with scholarship funds. I think longer term, when as we settle into sort of whatever the new normal is, there's definitely an opportunity there to say, hey, um, the Mayor Garcetti in Los Angeles said, it might be until the end of the year that we continue to suspend or ban large gatherings of any kind. If that's the case, then like, man, we're also going to be home playing video games. We might as well like do something together. I think there's a lot of opportunities to sort of like bridge those gaps and stay closer together, at least on the Rift or on the internet when we can't in real life. Um, so I think like we'll see how that evolves over time. With any luck, this doesn't last too long, and we can kind of go back to normal. But I think the reality is a lot of traditional brands and organizations are like, cool, we can't get anyone to come to our event, so I guess let's try a live stream or let's try doing something online, and they're gonna see how well that works. There's going to be a lot of proof points, and for the like kind of fast followers that came out this year, like uh, NFL Game Pass or Disney Plus or like traditional media outlets or companies that are sort of delving into streaming or online platform support. They're probably going to see their numbers go way up during this, and people are going to start engaging and getting more connected to there. And then you're going to start seeing others trying to follow that. And there are music festivals or just brands that are doing activations online instead of in person, and suddenly they're going, wow, we had a lot of people tuning in and it was a different kind of broadcast because everyone's locked at home, so what can you do? But there's a market there that I think is still untapped by traditional media. I think most people that are deeply involved in esports recognize that there's still sort of this awareness bubble. If you ask people what the most played video games are, like you'll probably hear Fortnite and Call of Duty and stuff like that. Like League of Legends is like one of the best kept secrets in entertainment sometimes. Where it's like if you're not looking for it, you may not know that League exists, but I guarantee you know a lot of people that play League of Legends.
Yeah, very much
So
so.
so this might be the kind of thing that pops that bubble a little bit and gets people inside the streaming ecosystem, that gets people into the esports ecosystem more, and bridges that gap and maybe brings a lot more attention, a lot more focus on kind of competitive esports and in college and in everywhere.
All right, sounds good. That was it for the Q&A, and that's pretty much the wrap on the podcast. Thank you so much for being on, Tiz. I was honored to have you on.
Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me, Josh. I mean, you've been doing this for a while, and we over at the collegiate team at Riot appreciate the work you do, and we thought this would be a cool opportunity to have me on here. So really appreciate you inviting.
Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Do you have any shout outs or anything you want to close with?
Sure. Shout outs to the Scholastic team over at Riot. Matt Beerus, Michael Sherman, Caroline Montano. They're all great people. They all care a lot. Um, I wish there was a way that I could show players in the college space in general or high school space how much everybody cares. How hard we think about doing things that'll do right by players. We don't always do the best job of communicating what we're trying to do or why. Um, but there's a lot of passion and a lot of heart on the team. So I hope people know that like we're doing our best to do right by everybody.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Stay safe and stay healthy, Tiza.
You too. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Thank you. See ya. I don't think I could have asked for a better guest for a final episode, a season finale. Thank you very much, Tiza. That was very enjoyable. I hope everyone else enjoyed it as well. I certainly did. It was great getting to talk to him. Super grateful. Like I said, I really didn't think he was going to say yes or at least get back to me in time or whatever. But he did, and I guess now it's history. So I'm super happy to have lived it. So thank you very much once again. I really hope that these helped you out during quarantine, to you listeners. It's certainly helped me out. I got to talk to people that I normally don't get to, catch up with some old friends as well, and just kind of stay creative, widen my knowledge of the collegiate esports scene, which I'm all for anytime. I learn more about TESPA, learn more about Valve. It's been good. Learn the ins and outs of Collegiate League of Legends, which that's invaluable to me. So I'm super happy about that. But again, I just really hope it helped you all during quarantine, gave you something to look forward to for sure. And listen, get to know people with me. It's been fun. Yeah, I don't know when I'm gonna have this back or start doing it again, because I haven't got all that fleshed out. At least once a year, that's for sure. There's always going to be an off season for Collegiate League of Legends, collegiate esports in general. So I'm going to do this at least once a year. And there's always new personalities, new staff, new key people in the industry, in the scene. And as long as that's going to keep going, then I'm going to keep being interested, and I'm always going to have something new to learn, which means I'm always going to be having this podcast. It might not be on the most consistent basis, because I'm not the most consistent person unless someone's paying me. That's just how it is. And so far, I don't make any money from this. Not that I really want money. I really don't care. But that does make me more consistent. But that's just how life is right now. Either way, you can always hit me up on Twitter, twitter.com/Feques, P-H-E-Q-E-S. I'm there. Shit, you want to play some video games with me, hit me up. I don't know. I'm even playing League of Legends again. Playing XCOM, playing League of Legends, trophy hunting in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Just trying to stay, busy, even if it's not super productive. But, also keep my brain creative. That's why I write. That's why I did this. I'm going to do some other videos too. I don't know what, though. I talk about video game reviews. But as far as collegiate esport things go, I'll tell you what, I kind of want to do a ranking of the best schools in Collegiate League of Legends history so far. It's especially now that I know more about certain schools than I previously did. I think it might be, there might be time to do something like that. But you can always hit me up on Twitter and follow me there, and I'll announce whatever I'm doing there eventually. My Twitter's down in the description below. I've already spelled out my name once. It's hard to spell. And heavens know I can barely spell anything in the first place. That's actually not true. I'm actually a pretty decent speller, so it's fine. But once again, I really hope you all miss my rambles, because I will just go off on the most beaten path, like off beaten path. I have a point A and point B, but it's not a straight line. I guess that says a lot about me, though. Anyways, thank you very much for joining me this season. I will see you all next season, whenever that is. I'll be grateful that you're there. Thank you very much. I love you all. Stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands, and we'll get through all this together. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.